In southern India, there was once a man so charming, so considerate, that any woman would have dreamed of marrying him. But overnight, he turned into someone unrecognizable, cold, brutal, and terrifying. What could possibly transform such a man into a cold-blooded killer? This story begins with Anitha Bungera, a young woman living in the town of Bantwal, located in the Dakshina Kannada district of Karnataka state. At 22 years old, an age often considered ideal for marriage in many Indian families, Anitha had become a source of growing concern for her parents. They scraped together every rupee they could, sometimes cutting back on household expenses, just to save enough for a dowry that might win favor with a future groom's family. But despite searching far and wide, they still hadn't found a suitable match. The mood in the house grew heavier each day, especially as neighbors began whispering about why she still wasn't married. Then, on the morning of June 17, 2009, while the family was preparing breakfast as usual, Anitha quietly slipped away. She took with her some gold jewelry, a sum of cash, and a mobile phone worth around $3,148, a gift from her family for her eventual wedding. Without a word, she left the house and disappeared. The moment her absence was discovered, her family panicked and rushed to the police. But to their shock and dismay, the local authorities refused to treat the case seriously. They labeled it a typical runaway romance, suggesting that Anitha had likely eloped with a Muslim man and might even be coerced into converting to Islam. Less than 48 hours later, the police declared that Anitha had indeed converted and was now living with a Muslim man, despite providing no concrete evidence to support the claim. The family was outraged by the assumption. Frustrated and desperate, they turned to Hindu community leaders and youth organizations for help. Soon, a crowd of at least 150 people formed and marched to the police station in protest. They demanded a full investigation and warned that if the case wasn't taken seriously, they would burn down the station themselves. Faced with growing unrest, senior police officials could no longer ignore the situation. Fearing that tensions might spiral into religious conflict, they quickly elevated Anitha's disappearance to a high-priority investigation. Once the case was officially reopened, investigators realized it was far more complex than they had expected. Anitha had vanished without leaving any notes or witnesses behind. The only clue they had was the phone she had taken with her. When they accessed her call records, they discovered that prior to disappearing, she had been in frequent contact with an unfamiliar number, one her family didn't recognize. Following that lead, police began investigating the owner of the phone number. Records revealed it was registered to a man named Sridhar, living in the city of Madikeri. Officers quickly moved in and arrested him. It looked like the case was on the verge of a breakthrough, until Sridhar explained that, although the number was under his name, it had actually been used all along by his sister, Kaveri Manku. He added that Kaveri had gone missing under mysterious circumstances back on March 17th, and no one had heard from her since. Realizing that Sridhar's testimony might be connected to another missing person case, police immediately shifted their focus to reviewing Kaveri's call records. The findings were strikingly similar to Anitha's situation. Kaveri had also begun frequent communication with an unknown number shortly before her disappearance. Investigators followed the same tracing procedure, but this time, the results sent chills down their spines. The number was registered to a woman named Pushpa Vasukoda, who had also vanished without a trace. Seeing a disturbing pattern emerge, police followed the next lead, which brought them to another woman named Vinuta Pijina. Unsurprisingly, she too had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. By that point, 4 women had gone missing in eerily similar ways. Only then did investigators fully grasp the magnitude of the case. The situation escalated to the point where regional law enforcement was forced to mobilize. A statewide alert was issued across Karnataka, with all police departments instructed to share reports of missing women and any unexplained deaths, particularly from the past few years. What came back was more disturbing than anyone expected. After filtering the reports, local police stations identified over 20 missing women and dozens of unexplained deaths that could be linked. One of those cases occurred approximately 99.4 miles from Anitha's hometown in the city of Hassan. Then, on June 18th, the first major break in the case emerged. Local police in Hassan discovered the body of a woman in the restroom of the city's bus station. Her family confirmed it was Anitha. She was found wearing a traditional bridal sari, but strangely, none of the jewelry she took from home was on her. Forensic analysis was quickly added to the case file. The report confirmed that Anitha had died of cyanide poisoning. Curiously, the restroom door had been locked from the inside, with no signs of struggle or forced entry. All evidence initially pointed to suicide. But this raised serious questions. Why would a woman who had just been joyfully planning her wedding, talking with her family, and purchasing her bridal outfit suddenly take her own life? And why would she appear nearly 100 miles from home, dressed as a bride and alone? The deeper investigators looked, the more things didn't add up. While no clear conclusions could be drawn yet, one thing became evident. If they could find the central link in this chain of disappearances and deaths, the entire truth would eventually come to light. Driven by that belief, the investigation ramped up. More units joined the task force, and the method remained the same: trace every unknown phone number. Layer by layer, the digital trail led them to a shocking list of 20 missing women. Further analysis of location data revealed that all of them had, at some point, been in the same place: Dakshina Kata village. Even more telling, every SIM card used by these women had been inserted into the same mobile phone. Connecting the dots, investigators identified the owner of the phone as the key suspect in the case. Police concluded that he had been using each previous victim's phone number to contact the next, repeating the same tactic with chilling precision, creating a deadly chain of deception carefully orchestrated in advance. Following the digital trail, they eventually reached a teenage boy named Danush. It quickly became clear that he was not the man they were looking for. Danush explained that the phone had been given to him by his uncle, Mohan Kumar, a former elementary school teacher in the area. When police went to verify his employment, they were told Mohan had been fired long ago, and no one had seen him since. With the trail suddenly going cold, police broadened their approach. They began cross-referencing missing persons reports from other districts and retracing possible travel routes Mohan might have taken, hoping to find new leads that had been overlooked. Then came a breakthrough. A local seamstress named Sumitra walked into the police station and shared a crucial piece of information. She said that back in June, she had seen Mohan personally escort Anitha onto a bus headed for Hassan. She also recalled that in 2005, Mohan had approached her under the guise of being an agricultural officer and confessed romantic feelings for her, though she turned him down. Strangely, after years of silence, he had recently started contacting her again. Seizing the opportunity, the police crafted an undercover operation. They asked Sumitra to pretend she was willing to marry Mohan and use the wedding discussion as an excuse to set up a meeting at a predetermined location. Mohan agreed without hesitation. Everything was set. On October 21st, 2009, Sumitra arrived at the Dakshina Kannada district bus station as planned, while undercover officers lay in wait. As soon as Mohan appeared, plainclothes officers closed in and apprehended him. The man behind a months-long killing spree that had left police baffled was finally in custody. But what happened next surprised even the investigators. As news of the arrest spread, locals expressed disbelief. Many insisted Mohan was a polite, soft-spoken schoolteacher who always behaved respectfully. His wife even described him as the perfect husband, a devoted family man who couldn't possibly be a killer. However, the truth painted a much darker picture. Mohan Kumar was born on April 6, 1963, into a poor Dalit family in Karnataka's Dakshina Kannada district. He was the eldest of 2 children, with a younger sister 5 years his junior. Both of his parents worked as manual laborers, struggling to survive at the bottom of India's rigid caste hierarchy. When Mohan was just 10 years old, his father abruptly abandoned the family, vanishing without a word. Despite the hardship, Mohan's mother fought to keep him in school, determined that her son would break the cycle of poverty through education. Mohan didn't waste the opportunity. He studied hard and eventually earned admission into one of India's top universities, a rare achievement in their village. For a time, Mohan Kumar was considered a local hero, the pride of his struggling community. After graduating, Mohan was hired as a teacher at a public elementary school in the Dakshina Kannada district through a state-administered civil service exam. Every day he showed up to school dressed neatly, speaking politely and acting with humility. To colleagues and students alike, he was the model teacher, respected, admired, and well-liked. In 1987, at the age of 25, Mohan married an 18-year-old woman named Mary. They were once deeply in love, but the marriage quickly deteriorated. Mary was a devout Christian and refused to convert to Hinduism, as Mohan's family had expected. Their religious differences proved irreconcilable, and the couple soon divorced. By 1992, Mohan married again, this time to a woman named Manjula. After the wedding, Manjula proved to be loving and devoted. She gave birth to 2 children and took care of the household with dedication. But despite having a stable family, Mohan remained unsatisfied. While still living with Manjula, he secretly married another woman named Sridevi, who later bore him 2 more children. Mohan kept both families entirely separate. Neither wife knew about the other. To both Manjula and Sridevi, he was a responsible husband who provided financial support on time every month and made sure the family never had to worry about expenses. To his children, Mohan was a warm and attentive father. He played with them often and spent quality time at home. But behind the curtain of this double life, Mohan's professional record began to unravel. He was suspended multiple times for skipping classes and inappropriate behavior toward students. Eventually, he was transferred to another school. The most serious incident occurred in 2003 when he pushed a woman into a river. Fortunately, a nearby fisherman rescued her just in time. Mohan was prosecuted for attempted murder. In court, he denied the charges, claiming that the woman had once proposed to him but was rejected. According to Mohan, during a heated argument, she slipped and fell into the river by accident. He insisted he never pushed her. Perhaps because he was a school teacher, the judge showed leniency, believing his version of the story. Mohan was sentenced to just 1 month in jail. But those 30 days behind bars would prove to be a turning point. While in custody, Mohan befriended an inmate who was a goldsmith, serving time for an environmental poisoning case. The man had used cyanide solution to extract precious metals, then dumped the toxic waste carelessly in an open field. As a result, 8 cows grazing on contaminated grass collapsed and died on the spot. The night before his release, while the entire prison was asleep, the goldsmith leaned in and whispered to Mohan, "Just a little cyanide is enough to kill a chicken, a goat, even a person. It works so fast they won't even have time to react." He added that cyanide was easy to obtain, no permits, no paperwork, and the price was only about $3 for 2 pounds. Mohan said nothing. He simply stared at the concrete floor in silence. The next morning, Mohan walked out of the prison with a small bag and a blank expression. But when he returned to the city, nothing was the same. The school where he had once worked reviewed his record, considering both his criminal offense and his history of disciplinary issues, and decided to officially terminate his employment. Mohan was furious. He applied for short-term teaching jobs elsewhere, but most schools rejected him due to his tarnished background. Even non-teaching jobs proved difficult to get. Some avoided him, others simply said no outright. With each rejection, the weight of failure grew heavier. Mohan couldn't accept that he had fallen to the bottom of society. To cope, he avoided talking about his work situation and cut off contact with family and friends, as if by not acknowledging the truth, it might somehow cease to exist. Instead of facing reality, Mohan built an illusion. He lied, telling his family he was still teaching at a remote mountain school. Every day, he dressed in long-sleeve shirts and neatly pressed trousers, left home on schedule, and maintained the appearance of a respectable educator. The lie was enough to keep his family calm. But the financial burden of supporting 2 separate households continued to weigh him down. While he managed to keep up the facade on the outside, inside, Mohan was beginning to crack. As his savings dried up, he started entertaining options he would never have considered before. That was when the prison conversation about cyanide replayed clearly in his mind. A cheap, fast-acting, and nearly undetectable poison. Each detail began to feel like a blueprint for a dark plan taking shape. In the slum where he lived, Mohan noticed a specific kind of vulnerability. Men rarely carried cash, but women, especially young brides-to-be, often wore gold rings, bangles, and necklaces. These items could easily be sold or pawned. This tradition stemmed from deep-rooted gender inequality in India, where sons are often favored over daughters. Women tend to have lower social status, fewer job opportunities, and are expected to focus on domestic duties after marriage, making them more likely to be seen as financial burdens. From this harsh reality, Mohan began closely observing households preparing for their daughters' weddings. During this time, the bride's family is responsible for gathering gifts like gold jewelry, money, and other valuables to present to the groom's side, a form of dowry to ease the separation. In poor families or when the bride was considered less attractive, finding a husband became even harder. Parents would often spend years working themselves to the bone just to collect a generous dowry. Mohan knew this, and he saw a way to exploit it. With this understanding, he created a new identity, a wealthy businessman. Quietly, he acquired cyanide from a chemical supplier. Now armed with poison, he began calculating his next move. How to get women to meet him voluntarily, with all their valuables in tow, without raising any suspicion. At the same time, he needed to ensure their families would be too ashamed or afraid to go to the police after the crime was committed. With careful planning, Mohan began to construct the profile of his ideal victim. Poor women between the ages of 25 and 30, with average looks and no significant social standing or family influence. These were women often afraid of never getting married, and if they went missing or were harmed, their absence would barely register a reaction from the community. He devised a step-by-step strategy to approach and earn their trust. First, Mohan enrolled in matchmaking services to scout potential targets, secretly gathering details about each woman's background and family situation. Once he found someone who fit his criteria, he would pretend to be a government employee newly transferred from another town or a man with a stable job, just enough to seem respectable without raising suspicion. Then, he'd initiate casual conversation and ask for her phone number. If the woman responded positively, he would invite her out for tea or coffee, just a simple date. And if she accepted without hesitation, he knew he already had the upper hand. Next, he would suggest a walk in the park, subtly gauging her comfort level with light physical contact. Over time, he nurtured the relationship, building trust, and when the moment felt right, he would express his desire to marry her. Under the mask of a polite, educated man with a calm demeanor, Mohan seemed like a genuine, respectful partner. Most women he targeted quickly fell for the illusion. Once the woman was fully convinced, he began discussing marriage. Rather than proposing a lavish wedding in the city, Mohan would suggest a simple ceremony in his rural hometown or at a small, quiet temple to avoid attracting attention. To ease any doubts from the woman's family, he even paid them visits, acted serious about the relationship, and clearly laid out wedding plans, making it seem like everything was already arranged. With such a convincing picture of love and commitment, it was rare for the women to say no. They would carefully do their makeup, wear vibrant saris, adorn themselves with the gold jewelry their families had prepared, and carry with them a heart full of excitement and trust, walking straight into the deadly trap Mohan had constructed. Even more chilling, Mohan meticulously timed his proposals, deliberately tracking each woman's menstrual cycle to strike during their most vulnerable period. Taking advantage of this trust, he would invite the woman to stay at a hotel near the train station, far from his own neighborhood, for one night before the supposed wedding in his hometown. In that private setting, he used sweet words to mask his ulterior motive, initiating intimacy under the guise of affection. The next morning, he would suggest a relaxing walk and persuade her to place all her jewelry and important documents into the hotel safe, warning that the journey home could be dangerous and they might get robbed. Without a second thought, she'd comply, while Mohan quietly collected everything and prepared to leave with it once they checked out. Everything unfolded exactly as Mohan had planned. As they walked around the train station, He acted tender and affectionate, painting a picture of the happy future they would share. Taking advantage of her vulnerability, he suddenly changed his tone, telling her that they had been intimate the night before without using protection. He warned that if she became pregnant before the wedding, it would bring shame to her family and possibly lead to the ceremony being called off due to social pressure. Exploiting her fear and confusion, Mohan pretended to help by offering a pill he had prepared in advance. He told her it was emergency contraception and advised her to take it in the station restroom if she started feeling uncomfortable. Trusting him completely, the woman took the pill into the restroom, locked the door, and swallowed it, just as Mohan instructed. She had no idea the pill contained cyanide, a deadly poison that can kill within minutes. Within moments of ingestion, her body began to convulse violently before collapsing inside the restroom. She reached for the door, but was unable to call for help. Outside, Mohan waited calmly for about 30 minutes. If she didn't come out, he knew his plan had worked. He then returned to the hotel, packed all the jewelry into a suitcase, and quickly boarded the next train, disappearing into the crowd. To avoid detection, Mohan didn't sell the jewelry immediately. He typically waited several days before taking it to a jewelry shop in another town to exchange for cash. The money was then split between his two wives, who lived separately and knew nothing of each other. All of Mohan's victims were poor young women with little education and families too under-resourced to search for them. Their relatives assumed the women had simply married far away, and when they stopped responding, it raised no alarm. To reinforce that belief, Mohan used the victims' own phones to send messages back home, saying they were happy and well in their new lives, and there was no need to worry. In reality, though families never filed police reports, the bodies of these women were eventually discovered, sometimes within hours, sometimes after several days. Each time a body was found, Indian police opened a case. But instead of launching a serious investigation, most of the cases were quickly ruled suicides. Many files contained just a few lines of summary before being shoved into a drawer, ignoring all the red flags present at the scene. The reasons were disturbingly simple. There were no signs of physical assault, the restroom doors were locked from the inside, the families never reported the women missing, and the train stations were too crowded to trace anyone. Rather than investigate further, authorities often concluded the women had died of sudden cardiac arrest or unknown causes, skipping autopsies and even identity verification. Still, there were a few officers who sensed something was off, especially when multiple young women were dying suddenly and inexplicably. In some cases, medical tests even revealed traces of cyanide in their blood, but those suspicions were dismissed. No investigation was pursued, and one by one the murders faded into obscurity, while the killer remained in plain sight. Tracking down the killer became even more difficult because Mohan committed his crimes in multiple regions, each managed by a separate police department. These departments only handled cases within their own jurisdictions, rarely shared information with one another, and lacked a unified database to cross-reference or connect similar deaths across districts. As a result, no one realized these were linked cases with the same perpetrator. Each woman's suspicious death was treated as an isolated incident, filed away quickly, without triggering any broader alerts. Meanwhile, Mohan constantly changed identities. Sometimes he posed as a recently divorced man, other times as a meticulous doctor or a polite government officer. With his respectable appearance and sweet-talking promises, he gradually inserted himself into the lives of unsuspecting young women. From that point forward, Mohan's boldness escalated beyond all bounds. He developed a repeatable cycle for his crimes. Whenever he needed money, he would seek out a new target. Once the relationship progressed to a level of emotional closeness, his plan kicked into gear. It began with a proposal, aimed at gaining access to the woman's assets, and ended with a carefully staged poisoning disguised as a tragic accident. What's truly terrifying is that this string of murders went unchecked for years, with virtually no intervention from authorities. Between 2005 and 2009 alone, at least 21 women died under suspicious circumstances. And these deaths might have remained unnoticed if not for the determination of Anitha's family. They not only filed repeated complaints, but also mobilized over 150 local residents to protest at the police station, going so far as to threaten to burn it down if the case was ignored any longer. It wasn't until the public pressure spilled beyond the local level that the media began to take notice. The wave of poisoning deaths suddenly gripped national attention, shocking all of India. Major outlets like Deccan Herald and the Times of India featured the story on their front pages. For weeks, nightly news programs covered the unfolding scandal, until Mohan's name was overshadowed by a new, chilling nickname, Cyanide Mohan. Even under intense public scrutiny and relentless media coverage, Mohan remained cold and defiant. Throughout his time in pretrial detention, he denied all allegations, insisting he had never harmed anyone. But a police search quickly shattered that lie. At the home of one of his wives, officers found a large stash of cyanide powder, 4 cell phones, a fake government seal, business cards with various job titles, and dozens of receipts from gold sales, along with jewelry that had not yet been sold. Forensic analysis confirmed that some of the items belonged to Anitha and another identified victim. As police built a stronger case, the horror began to ripple into Mohan's own household. His 2 wives, who had unknowingly lived parallel lives with him, were among the most devastated. They could not believe that the gentle, caring man they had shared their homes with had secretly maintained 2 marriages while at the same time murdering multiple innocent women in cold blood. Under mounting pressure in the interrogation room, Mohan eventually broke down and confessed. He admitted to poisoning at least 32 women with cyanide between 2005 and 2009. When asked to name the victims, he coldly replied that he couldn't remember their names or faces. Investigators weren't surprised by his apathy. Mohan even struggled to recall the exact names of his 2 wives. To keep track of his crimes, Mohan had maintained a personal notebook, meticulously documenting fake names and identities he had used, along with a list of women he had targeted, including, disturbingly, details about their menstrual cycles. What was once a private journal became a key piece of evidence in helping police unravel the full extent of his crimes. Still, prosecutors were unable to bring charges for all the murders Mohan claimed responsibility for. Although he confessed to killing 32 women, many of the bodies had been cremated, and key evidence and identification documents had been destroyed. In the end, only 20 cases had enough verifiable evidence for formal prosecution. For these, prosecutors charged Mohan with a range of serious crimes, including murder, kidnapping, poisoning, identity fraud, and related offenses. The trial appeared to be headed toward a straightforward conviction until Mohan suddenly reversed course just before appearing in court. He retracted his confession, insisted he had never killed anyone, and claimed the women had taken their own lives after he rejected their marriage proposals. He even blamed the victims, calling them emotionally weak. Rather than hiring a defense attorney, Mohan boldly declared he would represent himself. At the first court hearing, Mohan showed up looking polished. His hair was dyed black and neatly combed. He wore a pen clipped into his shirt pocket and carried himself like a legal professional, calm and composed. He bowed respectfully to the judge, took notes in his journal, and behaved more like a law student attending a lecture than a man facing multiple murder charges. Then came the first cross-examination, and Mohan stunned the courtroom. He pointed out a discrepancy in the case files. One document stated he had sold gold, while another claimed it had been pawned. He challenged the lead investigator to explain whether this was a clerical mistake or evidence tampering. He even suggested the statements weren't written by him, but fabricated by police. After reviewing the records, the judge confirmed it was a simple typographical error. Despite this brief moment of drama, it was quickly overshadowed by the overwhelming evidence presented by the prosecution. Physical items, consistent witness testimonies, and corroborated timelines left Mohan's defense increasingly flimsy and unconvincing. In December 2013, the court found him guilty and sentenced Mohan to death in 3 of the confirmed cases: Anitha, Lilavati, and Sunanda. He was also sentenced to 5 years in prison and fined $500 for kidnapping, 8 years in prison and fined $500 for sexual assault, and 3 years in prison and fined $1,000 for poisoning. After delivering the verdict, the court moved to the judge's statement. As the gavel struck with finality, the judge expressed outrage, emphasizing that the defendant had not only taken innocent lives, but had also betrayed sacred values, trust, marriage, and love. Mohan had used the guise of marriage to commit murder, and for that level of cruelty, he deserved the harshest penalty allowed by law. But what followed that sentence sparked even greater public anger. In 2017, after Mohan filed an appeal, a higher court commuted his death sentence to life imprisonment. In later proceedings, he received additional death sentences and was handed another 15 years of life imprisonment. Then on June 26, 2020, following a new complaint filed by the family of victim Pushpa, Mohan was sentenced to yet another life term, bringing the total number of convictions to 20. This long string of overlapping rulings ignited a wave of fury across India. The public was no longer silent. People took to the streets, surrounded police stations, and protested not just against a serial killer, but against a system that had failed to protect women. Under growing pressure from the public and media, the government was forced to act and implement urgent reforms. As public outcry intensified, a number of major reforms began to take shape. Cyanide, once sold freely and without oversight, is now heavily regulated. Matchmaking centers are now required to verify the full identity of each member. When a woman goes missing, a mandatory 72-hour response protocol must now be triggered. In addition, every unidentified female body must be publicly reported in national media, allowing the community to help identify victims. On social media, police departments regularly warn citizens, don't risk your life for a love story that hasn't been verified. Today, Mohan is over 60 years old and remains incarcerated in a prison in Karnataka state. For the families of his victims, it no longer matters whether he is executed or imprisoned for life. The only thing they care about is that this man who used marriage to murder dozens of women never walks free again. But to Mohan, the deaths of those women are little more than passing emotions. He admitted that he felt sad whenever someone died, but only for a couple of weeks, and then the feeling faded. Once a new woman came into the picture, the memories of the old ones were pushed aside like yesterday's news. Looking back on this case, one thing becomes clear. A murderer doesn't always carry a knife or hide in the shadows. Sometimes he wears a gentle smile, holds a bouquet of flowers, slips a ring onto your finger, and whispers promises of a beautiful future. But behind those promises lies a door. And once it opens, it may lead you into something far more dangerous and far more tragic than you ever imagined. What do you think about this case? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next true crime investigation.